Here's what President Trump said just this afternoon about the whistleblower.
What the whistleblower said bore no relationship to what the call was. Then it turns out that the whistleblower was in cahoots with Schiff. Then it turns out that the whistleblower is a Democrat, strong Democrat, and is working with one of my opponents as a Democrat that I might end up running against. When you see what the whistleblower said about the phone call, and it was totally different. He made it up. And I don't know why a person that defrauds the American public should be protected.
All right. Keeping them honest, in order, the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Act specifically makes reprisals or threats of reprisals subject to so-called urgent concern complaints that need to be passed on to Congress. There's no evidence the whistleblower was in cahoots with anyone, and the president offered none. As for the president's claim that the whistleblower's account of the call is radically different from the rough transcript, not the word-for-word transcript, which we have not seen, if there is one, that's not true either. The very first words on it after Ukrainian President Zelensky inquires about U.S. military aid, badly needed, desperately needed aid to fight Russians, is President Trump saying, and I quote, "I'd like you to do me a favor, though," followed by pressure to investigate the Bidens, faced with evidence in the president's own words on the president's own transcript that contradict what the president himself keeps saying. Wouldn't a so-called adult in the room try to stop the president from making such easily disprovable claims? Similarly, would he or she try to stop the president from saying this about the staunch U.S. allies now under bombardment tonight?
Now, the Kurds are fighting for their land, just so you understand. They're fighting for their land. And as somebody wrote in a very, very powerful article today, they didn't help us in the Second World War. They didn't help us with Normandy, as an example. They mentioned names of different battles. They were there, but they're there to help us with their land, and that's a different thing.
Well, it's hard to know what that even means, but the president seems to be suggesting that the Kurds have always just been in it for themselves and that they didn't help us in Normandy in World War II. More than 10,000 Kurds have been killed in the fight against ISIS. A fight, by the way, that we asked them to undertake. He also said this.
Well, they're going to be escaping to Europe. That's where they want to go. They want to go back to their homes, but Europe didn't want them from us. We could have given it to them. They could have had trials. They could have done whatever they wanted. But as usual, it's not reciprocal. You know my favorite word, reciprocal. That's all I want. I don't want an edge. I just want reciprocal.
Well, whatever you make of all that, the president has taken steps that have now exposed them to what could become mass slaughter. He's caused alarm among other allies in the region, including Saudi Arabia and Israel, and he has triggered a rebellion among many Republican lawmakers, including the very senators who may one day hold his political future in their hands. Whatever you think of the president's statements, decisions, or policies writ large, does any of this look like anything but a president determined to say and do what his gut and no one else tells him, to say and do anything to protect himself? And I misspoke on what he said to Zelensky. He said, I would like you to do us a favor. Perspective now from former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, who's also the author of Tough Love, My Story of the Things Worth Fighting For. The book is just out this week. I want to talk to you about your book because there's a lot in it. I do want to start, though, with just the latest on President Trump's comments about the whistleblower. He tweeted today that the whistleblower should be exposed and questioned properly, and now is saying that the whistleblower has perpetrated a fraud and therefore shouldn't have any sort of protections at all. When you hear this from a sitting president of the United States, I mean, I know on Election Day, I wrote in your book, you said you kind of convinced yourself maybe it won't be as bad as the campaign. Day after. Yeah. Maybe it won't be as bad. Can you imagine a president of the United States calling for the essentially whistleblower protections to be completely tossed out the window?
Anderson, it's appalling. And it's so much worse than I imagined. Every day, a lie, a disparagement, and a trashing of the institutions and the norms that we all believe have held us together. And what's so extraordinary is it's all about him. I mean, we talk about foreign policy, and he says his doctrine is America first. What I think we're seeing is it's really me first. And that's how he is governing. Everything is about him. And so the notion that you could attack a whistleblower with legal protections in our system, which is set up to enable transparency and to guard against precisely the kinds of abuses he's perpetrating, and to assume that that's therefore, he's called it worse than that. He's called it close to being a spy, treason in effect. He's
not just
alleged.
the whistleblower, but the people who the whistleblower talked to in the White House.
So he is arrogating to himself the institutions of the state.
He is the state.
Yeah.
I am the state.
Right. That's what we're seeing now. It's that is not an exaggeration. That's how serious it is.
It clearly seems, I mean, I don't know how much of what he does is really truly by design or just instinctual, but it certainly has got to send a chilling message to anybody else in the government about the possibility of coming forward. I mean, it would stop, I think, a lot of people from considering coming forward.
Well, it could, but I think what we're seeing, in fact, is more people come forward. Now we have a second whistleblower with firsthand experience of what happened, corroborating exactly what's already out there. And indeed, President Trump's own transcript corroborates exactly what's in the whistleblower's statement. So I actually think, Anderson, that we have enough patriots still working in this government, all throughout the agencies, who have to be deeply disturbed about this.
When you hear the president saying repeatedly it was the perfect phone call, nothing wrong with it, then asking China for help, that China should investigate the Bidens. I mean, you've read the transcript of the call. The president clearly believes in just repeating a lie over and over and over again until everybody becomes so exhausted they just give up and just
and he
let him
confuses
have it.
people. Yeah, that's his whole tactic. That's how he has, that's how he has arrogated to himself so much power. He's got several tactics that he repeats. One, lie. Two, confuse, deflect. And three, what we're seeing in this Biden thing is take what is Trump's greatest weakness, the perception that he's corrupt, that his children are corrupt, that they've used the office to enrich themselves, and try to make it his opponent's greatest vulnerability.
When you went on the Sunday shows and talked about the early reports and the intelligence community assessment of what had happened in Benghazi, and it was very early reporting, some of it was not accurate, and you pointed out that it was early reporting, that obviously brought you into a whole maelstrom, and you would dedicate an entire chapter to this. You've had people on Capitol Hill making up stuff about you. You've had people on Capitol Hill, for political reasons, going after you. When you see what the Republicans, the silence on the side of the Republicans regarding the president on Ukraine, regarding the president on China, asking a regime like China to investigate, the Bidens is, I don't even really know what to say about it. But when you see the Republicans' response to this, the senators and congresspeople, does it surprise you? Even with all you've seen, does that surprise you, the silence? Or the saying, oh, he's only kidding?
It's galling and it's disappointing. Congress set up 8 committees to investigate Benghazi. Not one of them found that I deliberately misled the American people, including the one led by Trey Gowdy, who's now going to apparently defend Donald Trump. What we see now is Mike Pompeo, who is, one of the most avid prosecutors of the Benghazi so-called scandal, refusing to cooperate at all with Congress. The Obama administration provided documents. They provided testimony. Secretary Clinton sat for 11 hours. I sat for 4 hours before Gowdy and his crew behind closed doors. You know why? Because we had nothing to hide.
The situation in Turkey, the president said today, the Kurds are fighting for their land, and as somebody wrote in a very, very powerful article today, they didn't help us in the Second World War. They didn't help us with Normandy as an example. And in addition to that, we have spent tremendous amounts of money on helping the Kurds. I'm not sure what the article he's talking about.
What is he smoking?
Yeah,
The Kurds were the pointy end of the spear who fought ISIS on our behalf.
10,000 casualties.
They bled and died because they believed in the partnership they had established with the United States.
They believed that they would be protected
absolutely.
and honored.
Yes. And we just threw them under the bus in 24 hours. It's appalling. And it's disgraceful. And then today, when the Turks, quite predictably, are bombing the bejesus out of Syria, and Trump allegedly orders the U.S. military not to come to their defense, not to protect them? We've crossed a Rubicon here of betrayal that I think is going to haunt us for decades to come.
I mean, you know, the end of when South Vietnam finally fell, there were a lot of people who'd helped the United States left behind who weren't evacuated. You know, there's been criticism of not enough visas have been given to Iraqi translators and Afghan translators who risked their lives.
All of which is wrong, but this is an order of magnitude worse than that. We are handing over our Kurdish allies to slaughter. And that blood is going to be on Donald Trump's hands.